All right, welcome everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. Today is September 18th, 2019, and welcome to the Kubernetes Office Hours, the live stream where our panel of experts here tries to answer as many of your Kubernetes questions as possible. Let's get started real quick with intros. Let's go Bob, Jeff, Mario, Pavlis, and Bargov. You must be BB. Awesome. Great. Everybody introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I'm a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. Sort of my specialty in the Kubernetes space is like multi-cluster, federation, sort of on-prem networking and deployments and fun things like that.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I am now no longer at the University of Michigan. I work at Red Hat doing CI/CD and integrations. Kubernetes-wise, my main focus is dashboard, release, and like batch jobs and research type workloads.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mario Loria. I am a SRE DevOps infrastructure lead at StockX. And in the Kubernetes world, I'm mostly in auto-scaling, ingress, service mesh, that kind of networking layers and longevity as well. So,
hey guys, I'm Pavlis. I'm a software engineer, and I work a lot with Kubernetes, both as a user and as an administrator. Most of my specialty is in observability and metrics.
And we have a new person, Bargav. Are you going to participate or just hang out? You can do whatever you're into. The mute button's at the bottom of your UI in the Zoom window. All right, while you get your Zoom, I'll go through the intro and then we'll come back to you here. All right, so welcome everybody. Let's start with some ground rules before we start. First of all, you can find us on #office-hours on Slack. Say hello when you're from there. We see people from Michigan, Tel Aviv, Netherlands, Kazakhstan. Awesome. So what we do is during the live stream, we put the chat on the side there so you can participate. We can kind of have a lot of fun here together. But before we start, there's a few ground rules. So this is a judgment-free zone. Everybody has to start from somewhere. There are no dumb questions. So please help someone out when they are, and be supportive of them when they are asking a question. And while we will do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't really have access to your cluster. So live debugging is off topic. We can't like SSH it to your network and like figure out your internal ingress or anything like that. But what we will try to do is at least try to show you where you can find things so that you can, whatever you're stuck on, you can at least move on to whatever the next thing is. And then panelists, you're encouraged to expand your answers with your experiences and pro tips. As always, any production expertise that you have is awesome. That goes for the audience as well. Love to have all the experts in the audience sharing their experiences and helping people out that are getting started. We always encourage people to do that. Audience, you also can help us by pasting URLs to documentation, or when we mention things, finding the GitHub URL, whacking it in there, blog posts about related topics, anything that you think can help the audience, feel free to just stick it in the Slack channel while we're in the middle of talking. And what I do is at the end of the show, we'll grab all the URLs and put it together in the show notes so that we can publish those to the community and then people can check out all the stuff we're talking about. There is a discuss thread for this, which Bob will be fishing out and putting into the Slack channel. That's kind of our asynchronous post. I do post a sticky thread about a week before. So if you can't make it to the Slack or anything like that, you can whack your information in there, and we will always look into that. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward, letting someone know that like you came here and got some help. Anything to help grow the audience would be really appreciated. And if you're an expert and you want to give back to the community, you can always just sit on the panel for an hour once a month. It's fun. That's where Pavlas came from. He was just hanging out. He didn't like my answer, so he was like, I'm going to do it myself way better. No, just kidding. We love to have a lot of people around, and a lot of the companies that these people work for do allow them to come on here and grant them an hour a month. So a big shout out to Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com. Weaveworks, VMware, Lyft, University of Michigan, Red Hat, Utility Warehouse, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada for letting their engineers come and help out the community. And always a special thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring a t-shirt giveaway. So the way it works is if you ask a question, we will put you in automatically for a raffle. And if you read your question live on air, what we'll do is at the end of the show, we will raffle away two t-shirts to two of you. So you have to stay till the end for the raffle. But keep on asking your questions and we will get to it. All right. And with that, panel, we ready? Any last minute comments? Looks like the chat is hopping today. So it's going to be a good one. I can already tell. All right. The first question. So those of you listening, just keep posting your questions and we'll put them in our little notes document. If after a while it's obvious that we either missed your question or something like that, feel free to repeat it. If we answer your question, feel free to post a follow-up and then we'll go to the next question and then we'll come back to you if you needed more detail or anything like that. Okay, so it's 6 minutes after. Let's get started. Marcos says, hello, I'm from Spain. I see that Customize with a K and Helm address similar problems to template Kubernetes definitions. Any insights on the best tool to describe complex Kubernetes applications? That's a good one to start off with. Mario, I know you're into Helm, and we're at the cusp of Helm 3 here. So why don't
I was kind of trying to think of what to say here. This is really a hard one. Helm can be tedious. I think Customize can make some things easier, but it doesn't solve all the problems. You're not going to find the 100% perfect solution. I would say try them both with an application that you're using. And we kind of did that a little bit, and we decided that Helm was just kind of made the most sense, especially from a CD perspective, continuous delivery perspective. So yeah, I mean, you say complex Kubernetes applications. I mean, yeah, as you start getting more complex databases and CRDs and other resources, even doing cron jobs and things like that. I think for me, Helm makes it pretty easy because I can use kind of a default template for what a cron job might look like. And as a template, it's easy to just kind of drop that into a chart for a particular service and then just kind of provide the variables that are needed through the values file. And so kind of the initial 0 to 60 of basic service Docker file, getting that to Helm is difficult. But once you're there, it makes adding other objects that you need for the application a little bit easier. So an example of this is an application we just did that we actually need an SSH tunnel for whatever reason to something else, and that was really easy to just deploy a very simple deployment and then set up the domain for how the other services contact it, etc. So yeah, there's Customize. There's like 3 other ones that are picking up steam, and they all solve the problem differently. So yeah, definitely just try things out in a very minimal capacity would be my suggestion there.
The other thing is like people actually use them together too. It's sort of there isn't a single best solution out there, and a lot of people are sort of revisiting which one is best right now with all the changes to Helm 3. I can say like if you have more complex logic and things like that, Helm is going to be better than Customize. The big advantage like Customize has now is it's like integration with like Cuddle and things like that.
All right. Any other comments? Moving on, Christian asks, hi guys, I'm currently migrating an application from Docker Compose to Kubernetes. My problem is that I have different algorithms to run that each run on a pod, and they should analyze the same image. In Docker Compose, I used to mount the same storage to all of them. How should I accomplish the same thing in Kubernetes? I read that it is not a good thing to have a global shared space in Kubernetes. I believe Jeffrey wanted this one. Yep.
I did. So if you're running on something like AWS, you could have like a shared EBS volume across everything, but performance-wise, that's not good. And actually, that's kind of an anti-pattern when it comes to doing analysis like this. Typically, and what you'll see in the HPC space, which does a lot of analysis like this, is you'll actually have a whatchamacallit, an init container or like a job before the job that will download the image to wherever you are executing your algorithm and then run it locally. So it's just running in scratch space. If you are running large, wide jobs, that makes the most sense, especially since you don't want, say, 100 pods hitting the same EBS volume. But if 100 pods download that image and then do the analysis across 100 nodes, it's much more performant. So in that case, I would just have sort of an init container, an ephemeral container that will download the image and do any pre-processing before the algorithm runs.
So yeah.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm super sick. So
I was gonna actually say that's kind of a great idea. I was actually thinking along the same lines of, maybe build the Docker image with the data inside, and then to that kind of like pull it down on each, depending on the data set, on how big it is. There's a lot of factors there, but if it's all the same data that you just need to analyze in different ways, then keeping the data the same, providing an entry point that maybe script that can do something different with that data could also make it easier. You don't exactly need to have some sort of global storage backplane.
This is sort of going against it, but like, as someone that's worked with researchers and seen container images that are greater than 15 gigs in size, I do not advocate putting the data set in the container itself.
Yeah, I was going to say that solves a problem for you, but might add 2 more.
Yep, exactly. It really depends on the nature of what you're trying to do. So I've just seen people try to fight and like, oh, let me get the data in some other place and all of that, when it's a gig of data maybe or something, or it's it's not a static data set. It's just a little bits and pieces that they can pull in and out. So it depends on the situation.
All right. Any other comments on this? I see the chat typing. If you're listening in, feel free to also give your opinions on the questions. That's always useful. Moving on next, Verxion has a question. Thanks for joining. I've been able to make a very simple proof of concept image, a .NET console app that continuously outputs text, run it locally, and push it to an Artifactory repository. I've already got my Kubernetes .kube configured with my secrets and such. I was told if I could successfully get no resources found as a response to kubectl get pods, and that I was set up properly. So at this point, I'm hoping to get some help on how to create a Kubernetes cluster, some pods, and deploy my proof of concept app to it. So it sounds like you've got your local container, yeah? And then are you running Kubernetes on kind of a single node, or is this Minikube or Kind or something?
Yeah, he doesn't really, it sounds like he hasn't really actually spawned a cluster, has any starting point at all. He's just kind of starting from zero.
Okay.
Here. But yeah, this is kind of a wide question.
Yeah.
It really depends on what he's trying to do. He could be, cloud might make the most sense, but yeah, definitely like make sure it sounds like locally you've got your Docker file ironed out, and
yeah, it looks like he has
maybe you do have a cluster, but
yeah, he has it installed on a cloud that he's using. So I think the next step is actually making a deployment in a server.
Have you written the deployment or anything like that yet, or just you just have the image?
Yeah, it looks like he has like a Docker image. He pushed it into Docker registry. So yeah, basically right now I think you need to look into deployment. Like there is a Kubernetes object which will create basically launch your application. You should also look into pods. So yeah, basically at the beginning I would just like try to run a simple pod with your image. Just see it in Kubernetes, take a look at logs, whether you actually get the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can link to a couple of tutorials.
Yeah, Bobby's got the link. I was searching for deployment as well. I'm going to expand on his question a little bit here. When you all, let's say you have your container and you're going to do your service, do y'all start with a deployment, or do you sit down and say, deployment, replica set, pod? Like, do you do all of them at once, or do you kind of just start with a deployment?
And the deployment does the replica set and all that stuff for you. It's kind of like required for the deployment spec itself. So
okay, so the deployment is the first thing that you start with. I'm trying to get the order down of.
Yeah, and the deployment provisions and manages the replica set for you.
Okay. And the pod, so he is not manually specifying. Yeah, I wanted to tease that out of you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's nest eggs all the way to.
Yes. So once he gets to deployment, it's like the little YAML file or whatever. What is the relationship between that? Like when is he going to need a service? So does he start a deployment that move to service, or is it likely that need a deployment?
It depends on what you're doing. If it's a .NET, like I think he said it was a console application, so in which case you wouldn't actually have a service for that. But if you have like anytime you're actually exposing the thing externally, so if you want like a web server or whatever, you then create a service, which then sort of points to the exposed ports of the pods.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it, even if his app doesn't do that, just everyone listening, is start with the deployment. You need a service.
Yeah, also if you have like a thing which actually needs to run until like completion, maybe you should start with the job instead of a deployment, because jobs are actually the things which you like run once and it sort of runs until completion and it's done. And you can see the logs in Kubernetes. So yeah, that's the other part.
Okay, so deployments looks like the place to start. That should get you started. He says eventually going to be a web app just to get everything as far as running in the Kubernetes cluster. So yeah. So then how's the workflow? I just want to talk generally here to be useful for more people. So you do your deployment. At some point, he does a service. Those of you using Helm and stuff, do you still go in that direction, or do you start off with like, let me find a Helm chart?
So I always find a Helm chart, usually something to base off of, or I might have my own or like another project. Most of the time it's actually something else I've done previously that I'm very intimate with, that I configured almost from scratch for myself or some need I had. And then I'll like kind of take that and run with it, because it has those templates already kind of in place for a base model. If I need to change a couple things, it just makes it easier to get going and get something out quicker. So, but I warn that like a lot of like the stable charts that you see on the GitHub for the Helm charts are great starting points for like those applications, but a lot of them are like very, very heavy in terms of different syntax and configuration, and a lot of it's beyond what a lot of apps need for most people starting out, depending on what they're trying to deploy. So don't pull something that you're going to delete half of, is just kind of what I'm saying. So
yeah, and for your simple app, I think it makes sense to start with the deployment, because you need to know that stuff, right? Like that's kind of the thing. Looks like a lot of people are sharing their documentation. Chris Short, how you doing? He shared his, looks like a Telegram CAPTCHA bot little service that should be useful. And then of course, Bob and Jeff's Kubernetes intro tutorials always have good information like this. Okay, so start with deployments and services. That should get you, that's plenty of homework there for you to get started. All right, anything else? Any other tips in chat before we move on? All right, awesome. Thanks for joining. Maxat asks, hi, my question in the office hours is, why is it a bad or good idea to run Calico on cluster nodes as a systemd service? And when we will use Kubernetes cluster autoscaling, will it be painful by running Calico as systemd on masters and as pods on the worker nodes?
I've actually never seen it run as a systemd service. It's always been deployed as a daemon set in Kubernetes.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I'm gonna +1 with that. So I wouldn't go against the grain. I would run it as a daemon set 100%. Maybe the instructions offer running it as just for systemd for some other reason, but
yeah. So I have seen few cases where people run it as daemon set. I mean, as systemd process in view of pods. For example, I've seen in CAdvisor case, the AWS runs as a systemd. You don't have to install as a pod. But I would go as pods, because the lifecycle management is quite easy. Systemd becomes very, to manage, to update the config, to change the image, to change the image version becomes a very difficult thing. So I would advise to go with the system, a pod mechanism.
Awesome.
Absolutely agree. Abstract away the node as much as possible. Cattle instead of pets.
Ooh, BB, introduce yourself since we figured out your mic.
Hi, sorry. I'm Bhargav Bikaji, and I just moved out of, I worked for Dell. I focused on Kubernetes, especially the networking side of this topic.
Oh, awesome. Great. Always awesome to have a networking person on. And for those of you listening, you can basically just ping me before the show if you want to get on the panel, and we'll just add you on here because we like to make it fun. So welcome. Curious here for Calico. I was just wondering if there was an operator for Calico. Is that a thing?
Most of them don't have an operator for it. Calico installs their own CRDs and everything.
Okay.
But for things like the networking side, they're pretty sort of like, not necessarily stateless, but like you just reapply the new, daemon set or whatever.
Yeah, and for a fact, I know that basically Calico gives you like Kubernetes manifests. You can just download them and apply them. Like, so yeah, I think like the easiest path would be definitely to go daemon set.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, what the default instructions say. And like, I'm just looking at all their documentations, and it's pretty much.
Yeah, I think it's just go and apply the manifest. You will have Calico up and running.
Yep. Okay, now part 2 of MaxSat's question. What is a true way to run a production-ready Kubernetes cluster? If I had $1 every time someone asked me this. Kubeadmin, KubeSpray, custom owned playbook, any other variant. We will, you know what, let's just each panel say your thing, and then I will add mine at the end. So what do y'all recommend here? I'm assuming they're talking bare metal there, so.
It honestly, I hate to say it depends, but it sort of depends. Like, we run our own custom thing using container Linux and kubeadm on top of that, with some bash glue. That's mostly like because of the container Linux like update agent and things like that makes it easy.
I know, I love it so much.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of other. If you're familiar with Ansible and you do a lot of Ansible stuff already, KubeSpray might be a good option. The other thing is, like, I would definitely advocate taking a look at like the cluster API, some of the projects coming out of that. Because you get to manage Kubernetes clusters like you manage Kubernetes itself.
Jeff, you have an opinion here?
It would have been the same as Bob's.
That's what I figured. Mario? On AWS, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna actually okay. So for bare metal, I really don't know. I really am not as well versed. Back when I was doing Kubernetes on bare metal, like the 1.4, 1.5 around there, like it was Tectonic, CoreOS Tectonic made it really easy. Had a lot of great scripts and whatnot for Pixie booting nodes and things. However, I'm gonna like venture to ask him like maybe think cloud depending on your thing. Like managing nodes is a lot of work from experience, and GKE or other EKS, Azure AKS, like they've got a lot of features now, a lot of things that they can do just kind of automatic for you, and it'll make life a lot easier. So definitely think about possibly doing cloud depending on your use case, but. Yeah, if you've got hardware, listen to Bob and Jeff. They know much more about the bare metal world of deploying Kubernetes now than I do. So,
Pavlis, you have an opinion?
Yeah, so I think it mostly like depends on scale. If you have like 3 nodes, like 5 nodes, or like if it's a super small cluster, then I would just like go simple way and use kubeadm. Kubeadm has all the instructions for upgrading your cluster, for like doing all the operations. It does like backups for you. It gives you like certificates. It's sort of, I think, like the most simple way to start off. But if you have like a lot of nodes, then you have to like look into some like more automated solutions.
BB, you have an opinion on bare metal?
Yeah, so I have seen customers where they've deployed on bare metal. One of the biggest concern they have is, hey, how do I maintain my HCD? How do I maintain my API servers? When I go to cloud, I already, all this, the kube system pods is already maintained by the cloud maintainers, and I don't have to do anything. So is there a better way to do it? I didn't really have an answer. They were looking for somebody like, Project Pacific is probably the right answer is what I thought. So it's a very open area there. Something. I don't really have an answer, but this is the discussions we typically end up having with customers. This is what their concern is. How do I maintain my HCD? How do I scale it? If I have 1,000 nodes, how do I scale it? Those questions is an open-ended right now, as far as I'm concerned.
One other thing, a lot of the in the bare metal space, you mentioned like OpenStack and stuff like that. There's Magnum. There's other things that sort of help make it more like the experience with the cloud provider. And a lot of the sorry. This is going back to like the cluster API, but there's a lot of efforts going on to sort of like more streamline that entire experience for you. I think one bare metal thing, it's called like Metal 3 or Metal Cubed, that will use like OpenStack Ironic to actually handle the lifecycle of all the machines on bare metal. So like you don't have to manage the OS or anything like that with that. It will just take care of it for you.
All right, and then my answer is basically an echo of Bob. Kubeadmin today if I'm on bare metal, and as cluster API gets developed, I feel like that's going to be the future. Just a reminder though, when you are doing bare metal, it's when I did my first one, I did Kubeadmin, I had my cluster up and running and everything. It still doesn't work. You have to do like the load balancer. There's all the other stuff you still have to do. So there really is no, oh, I typed Kubeadmin 3 times and I followed the stuff, because it's actually pretty simple. I was able to do it, no problem. But then there's all the other stuff that I did not plan for that kind of do me. And it sounds like a lot of these installers like are moving towards using either Kubeadmin directly or consuming cluster API in some way. So there's definitely some consolidation there.
The other thing I actually just want to touch on quick is even in some of the cloud providers, instead of using the managed service, people are starting to like actually deploy their own thing on top of it because, you know, either Google, Microsoft, or Amazon like let you use a different OIDC provider. You have to tie it in and use like their IAM roles or tie it into their like sort of authentication service for a lot of this stuff. So if you require like more customization, you essentially have to hand roll your thing.
Yeah, it's like bonus. I don't have to deal with the masters. Bummer. I don't get control of my own masters. And Long would like to add Rancher is good. He likes that for bare metal. And then there's some link. Okay, moving on because the questions are piling up now. Thomas Popasek, can you guys see this link here to this YAML file because it's quite long? Says, hi, I would like to re-ask a question from Kubernetes users. We're running Kube 1.14 on DigitalOcean. We have configured pods to both stick to some nodes, node affinity, and then to be repelled from other specific pods, pod anti-affinity. However, Kubernetes seems to be ignoring the anti-affinity. And then there's a configuration. I hope you guys can see the configuration because I don't want to read YAML on the air. Just give us a second here.
So I actually just did some of this more specifically to balance workloads better across availability zones in AWS. You know, I can't exactly say what's going on here. Just that obviously the scheduler is building a score for each node when it goes through and decides where to place a workload. And you do have both of these as required. So, you know, definitely it's trying to appease those. I know for
he says there's plenty of resources, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Sure. Yeah, I don't exactly know, you know, instance type for node affinity. I believe that's going to probably take over. Again, it depends on what he's doing. Yeah, I can't really like debug this live per se. It looks pretty sane. I'd maybe check your match expressions for the anti-affinity rule.
I've put a link there so the listeners can check out the question. Maybe we can.
For sure.
The only other thing is, I think required during scheduling, ignored during execution means that it won't evict pods if for whatever reason they're scheduled on the same. So for some reason a scheduling decision was made, it won't boot one off to the other.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's only for the initial placement. So.
Okay. So I posted the link to the question there in the channel again, and hopefully the people that are out there listening could take a look at this, and that will be good. And then let's give him some time. Let's see if he has some responses or if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something with his match expressions and I'm having two distinct expressions here, and maybe it doesn't like that they're colliding. So yeah, I'll look at it, and if I have any ideas, I'll let him know.
All right, and you could probably do is up the logging level of scheduler to see what it's doing.
Yeah, that is a good one. Good point. All right, so we'll leave the question there. Audience, if you could help him or her out, I'm sure they would appreciate it. All right, moving on. Shy Cat says, I'm really interested about Kubernetes dashboard recommendations. I feel that the official UI is not maintained and not going anywhere. Jeff, I added that Jeff part. Any other recommendations for replacements, mainly about AWS user integrations and more maintained products? I know we talked about this last week, so I'm going to dig up the notes. Jeff, you probably want to address this one.
I want to, say a couple things as one of the chairs of SIG UI. First off, in the last week, we've merged over 20 PRs, so I would not say that it's not maintained. It probably just doesn't have the velocity of a smaller project. That being said, I do know of several other pretty good dashboard alternatives. One of them that's kind of the new hotness that's come out is VMware's Octant. That's not meant to be a dashboard that multiple people consume at the same time. That's actually like something that you would run on your own desktop or laptop and then connect to a cluster. There was another project that came out called Kate's Dash, K8S Dash, that was completely written from the ground up in React instead of Angular, because dashboard is written in Angular. Both of those are pretty solid and do show multiple integrations. The current Kubernetes dashboard does have, or it's about to have, support for CRDs, which might help when it comes to showing AWS specific things. However, a lot of the dashboards that you'll see don't actually give insights into the clouds themselves. That's kind of a niche thing that the clouds want to offer people with their managed solutions, because that's, marketing and hey, use my managed thing because we
that's literally the business model, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
All right, and I have a thread. There's actually a few that I will paste in the channel here once I find it. That I know Henning did a long blog post comparing all the different kinds of dashboards and stuff, and we talked about this in detail last week. So I will find the notes and publish them while you all answer the next question, which is IO and R says, "Hey folks, do you happen to be aware of Zalando's CopF? It's a Python framework for writing Kubernetes operators. Do you have any experience on it? Anyone using it in production, or should we stick to the widely adopted Golang frameworks?" I don't know anything about this, but I do learn of a new project literally every single time we have this.
I have not heard of it. I thought that the Red Hat operator framework had Python support.
Let's see if you're listening, Chris Short, that'd be a great question for you to answer with regard to Python support in the operator framework. I'm not sure about that. Going once, going twice. Okay, so I guess we don't know a lot about that one. I see an OpenShift REST client Python. Is that the Red Hat one? Let's wait for, looks like Chris Short is AFK. Let's circle back when we see him. R. Salmon says, I looked at Kafka and we adopted another Zalando tool, Seems Sound, but we haven't leveraged it for anything. It's good to know. All right, let's move on from this one then. Sorry about that. Wish we had more experience in that. Dimitri, I hope I got that right. Question for observability. It seems a lot of the Grafana community charts for Kubernetes either don't work or only parts of the chart work. Do most companies create their own charts, or am I looking in the wrong place? Great question.
So my recommendation would be to look into Kubernetes monitoring. I think it's maintained by SIG Instrumentation, and basically there is a project called Monitoring Mixin or something like that, and it basically gives you Grafana dashboards, alerts, all that stuff. And it basically works. They have like basically release versioning, and they have a couple of versions for like Kubernetes later than 1.14, and we have a version which works like prior to that. So yeah, basically they are well maintained and really good.
Okay, Bob, looks like you have some links. DRO Sleen has some links there for some of the test infra job and PR dashboards. Awesome. All right. Looks like that's plenty of links to get you started. Feel free to ask a follow-up, and thank you for listening. Those of you joining us, we're about halfway through. This is the Kubernetes office hours. Hop into #office-hours on slack.kubernetes.io and ask your questions. Something, if you're listening in, something that we like to do is we do keep the channel open throughout the whole month. So feel free to hang out in there. If you ask a question when we're not on the air, we will queue it up for the next show. So feel free to always give us lots of questions. Next, Ramesh asks, in production environment, what's the best way to do rolling updates for deployments? Are tools like Jenkins or anything recommended? And I'll add an auxiliary here to the end. Any other tips about deployments, whether you're doing blue, green, red, black, whatever you call them?
As far as tooling goes, honestly, it sort of just depends on what your group has already adopted and doing. Like, lots of folks use GitLab. Jenkins X is sort of the new hotness in the Jenkins land. Was it Flux? What's the one from Weaveworks that does the whole GitOps deployment and stuff?
Yeah, Flux. I saw someone dropped a link to it in the chat earlier. Flux CD.
I think it's Flux CD. I just know it's Weaveworks Flux. I don't know if Flux CD is the same thing.
I think it really just boils down to like what actually works best for your group's workflow. And what integrates best with the other tooling outside that you're using.
Mm-hmm. And are you doing rolling updates at work? You, Mario? Anyone?
Yeah, so we use Circle CI, and really effectively like a CI/CD solution is just running commands, right? Mm-hmm. And returning the output and failing if something fails. So yeah, I mean, it's just running for us Helm commands to roll deployments, and then we have some options we pass to Helm to make them kind of as safe and atomic as possible, and then supporting rollbacks and issues like that as much as it can. And then obviously we can look at logs and whatnot, but the goal is to safely upgrade the service without causing downtime. And if there's an issue, stop everything, roll back to the safest version, and go from there. So we have lots of labels and other things like that to give us data. So when we troubleshoot, it makes it easier. In terms of what that thing is that runs those commands, that's, again, it really doesn't matter. I think Flux, GitLab all have a little bit more strapping for Kubernetes that might make it easier, especially when starting out. So.
All right. Any other opinions on this one? All right. Edward T, welcome, asks, I want to use the GitOps model to deploy apps to a cluster. How would one update the repo that maintains the cluster state? Would you just use sed to replace the image tag and then commit it? Are there tools that do that? Any good practices? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm literally at the fluxcd.io site, the GitOps operator for Kubernetes, and tool that automatically ensures the state of your Kubernetes cluster matches the configuration you supplied in Git. So that's going to be probably something you'll definitely want to look at. I haven't used it, but we've put out some great tools. EKSCTL is one of them, so I would trust it does what it says it does.
Yeah. Anyone else have opinions on this one?
Well, the one thing, like, you do kind of want to make sure that your commits keep your image versions and things like that in there, because sort of the entire idea is like you have this permanent history of everything that's happened in the cluster. So Git is the source of truth.
Well, I think when they ask the question, they would just replace it, and then that would be the new commit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to ask, I wanted to point the question at the process that happens before Flux CD takes over. Any insights here? Normally we do have Ilya from Weaveworks who could probably easily answer that, but he is not available today. So we might have to rain check this one. Anyone else have any insight on this part?
And I know a couple of people have like automated it, so they have one process that sort of pushes the image, and like that image essentially has a either git commit hash or like another hash in there, and then we'll sort of like auto patch and auto update another repo for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Automation on top of automation.
Yeah. I see people typing, so let's give them a second here. And then we'll move on. And then when Ilya comes on, I could definitely point him his way. Is there a GitOps channel on our Slack? Stand by.
I don't know about GitOps. There's the different products.
There is #GitOps on the Kubernetes Slack, so that might be a place to go. And I will definitely send Ilya your way, I think. So yeah, sorry about that. Not as smart on GitOps as I should be. All right, moving on. So check out #GitOps, and then I'll send a bunch of Weaveworks people that way, and we'll start from there. Marius asks, hello, how do you recommend to deal with cron jobs during deployments? Currently, I set them as suspended, deploy the application's new version, and after that, I apply the crons.yaml file with the new version and set the crons as not suspended on the crons apply. Is this a good way to do it, or would I get into problems one day? Thank you.
Only thing off the top of my head is if the cron jobs are executing while you're trying to update your app, having some check to make sure that there's no dangling jobs while you are doing an update would be nice. Otherwise, that's more or less the correct way I'd do it.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to disable them per se. In your check, maybe like what Jeff's saying, definitely doing that is important. But the cron job itself is not the job. It's important to remember that a cron job is a definition for when to run a specific job, and a job is an object in and of itself. So a cron job is just kind of a declaration of what you want to run. So you can definitely update the cron job with the latest image version after it's been built. It says that's in a CI/CD process. But yeah, that the current version running of that cron job is obviously running the old version if you do it at the same time. So, but yeah, you're definitely safe to update the cron job object while a job is running. So remember that job that is currently running is detached from the cron job kind of thing. Like it was spawned by the cron job, but it's now its own job. So.
All right, this seems pretty straightforward. Any other opinions on this one? We are almost caught up on questions here, and we have about 15 minutes before the t-shirt giveaway, so keep them coming. Maurizio asks, when I see devices being passed to Kubernetes, it seems that they must be in /dev first, like in Docker. Is there a way to expose /pass a device that only exists as /sys/bus instead? I don't think anyone's ever asked about that before. Is this our first IoT edge question? Is this like a hardware device?
I don't think it matters too much. It just depends on how it's like being mounted in there. And technically on Linux, everything is a file. So if it has the right permissions and you mount it in there, it shouldn't matter too much.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious. Do they see the device in the container? That's not obvious to me. I'm assuming no, because they asked a question. So Maurizio, if you're listening, if you could just give us some more detail, that might be able to help. And while we're waiting for that, just a reminder that Kubernetes 1.16 is probably coming out today, barring any problems. So it's going to be a busy day. Those of you asking, yes, we do these the third Wednesday of every month. I always announce them in the channel a week before. Or you could just subscribe to the Kubernetes channel on YouTube. Every time we go live, you will get a notification. But yeah, we've done this for what, almost 2 years? I don't know.
Quick thing on the 1.16 release. Remember the deprecation of the APIs.
Oh yes, we will get to that in a minute. In fact, I will post the thing. So there are some deprecated APIs coming in 1.16 that we want everyone to know about. And Bob is fiercely searching for the URL now. Moving on, keep the questions coming. If I haven't answered your question yet, please repeat it. I think next we have Ramesh's question, and then Ash looks like they have a question, so I'll go ahead and add that. Ramesh asks, I'm seeing nodes going unhealthy in the logs that shows plague. And pods go into a zombie state. Also, stateful pods stuck in termination state. What could be the reason?
Yeah, so I've run into this multiple times a while back, and it was almost always the runtime in this case Docker, and I would be on the host actually kind of systemd getting logs from Docker and trying to figure out what's going on there. A lot of it was like maybe odd issues like something space related or a lock somewhere or other things like that, or resource contender or something like that. I never really found like a singular like, oh, this always causes this, but if you do some searching on Google, you'll definitely have like a ton of results and you can kind of learn more about the error and what it means. But yeah, most of the time it's very specific to the node. And it's basically something related to kubelet working with the runtime to get the job done. And a lot of it, I think one of the times was Docker wasn't even responsive to kubelet. And so that it was a big problem. So definitely look at your nodes and what's going on there and check out the logs. So.
Okay. Any other recommendations? So you would probably start with the container runtime logs themselves.
Correct. Yep. I would start looking
to summarize.
I would actually look at kubelet first and make sure I understand like where the problem's happening and what kubelet is saying and trying to do. And then I would look at Docker as well and see what's going on there. So I've only ever seen it with Docker runtime. So.
Yeah, I would start from first. I would do the describe of the nodes to check where the real problem is. So, for example, if it's a kubelet, it will start showing it's false, and go from there. Why kubelet is showing false, and then take it from there. That would be my first step.
Okay. Any other recommendations? All right, moving on. Keep the questions coming. Ash asks, welcome. We got about 8-ish minutes before the t-shirt giveaway, so keep asking your questions. Ash says, I'm having a hard time trying to set up the Prometheus/Grafana/alert manager stack. The README on, and then there's a GitHub URL, deals with making changes to JSONet. There's a lack of documentation on how to customize. Sorry. A paste there made me scroll. There's a lack of documentation on how to customize the Kubernetes manifest inside the manifest folders, any pointers. So the README they're looking at is github.com/cores cube-prometheus. And that talks about JSONet. So let's have a look there. How are...
One quick thing is, I think they're still using KSonnet for this stuff, and KSonnet is no longer really...
This is JSON.
I was gonna suggest actually there's some pretty good Helm charts for this that we've used that work really well. So if Ash ever looks into maybe doing something with Helm, I know this was kind of the initial implementation of Prometheus on Kubernetes, but yeah, like as we know, JSONet and KSonnet aren't really supported anymore. So
yeah,
KSonnet was libraries for JSONet.
Yeah, but looking at that repository, it actually has like customization files, so it's probably it's uncustomized. So I would look at that file and actually try to figure out which manifests you actually need. But this seems to be like this repo is actually still maintained, and it's like the last commit was 5 days ago, so it should be doable.
So KSonnet was sort of libraries for JSONet. I don't think it's the KSonnet libraries themselves that are being actively maintained, but it's still possible to do everything with like JSONet.
Yeah. Any other comments on this one? Yeah, he says JSON is to maintain your dashboard. You convert them to JSON and import them to your Grafana. And there's the link to the customized package.
Yeah, so I think like definitely check out like customize docs and just try to apply it, see what happens, and then yeah, move on from that.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah.
I was just going to say use a Prometheus operator, but like, hold on. There's like
there's a lot tuning this thing.
Yeah, they have in there where they kind of discuss the operator versus Kube Prometheus versus the community Helm chart, which is interesting. Kube combines of Kubernetes Prometheus with a collection of manifests. And then there's a readme to the chart. So the recommended way to implement Prometheus would be through the Helm chart. I don't know. Like if you're a Helm shop, sure, right? But as I'm reading this, I'm actually more confused than I was before.
The last time I deployed this, admittedly this is like a while ago, is we used essentially the JSON case hunt to just render all the manifests directly and deployed the manifests.
Mm-hmm. And Mario, I'm assuming you're just using the Helm, the community Helm chart.
Yeah, there's a Helm Prometheus deployment that worked really well for us.
Okay.
And each piece of it or all of it together kind of thing. So that's in the stable repository.
Yeah. Recently, probably a month back, I did an AWS Prometheus. The Helm charts really worked out well. It was very simple. They have the node exporter, cube state map, metrics, alert manager, everything as one package. It just worked beautifully. I'll probably post the link.
So it looks like we have two options there for you, Ash. I did not mean to complicate your morning, but any other comments on this one before we move on? Because we are starting to get short on time. Max Guy wants to ask, what's your take on running traditional SQL databases like Postgres and MySQL on Kubernetes on-prem? So not RDS-like. I've been using Helm charts, but it can be painful. I'm experimenting with Zalando's Postgres operator and CockroachDB's operator. That's part of Rook. Anything you can recommend other than don't do it? There's a great blog series that I'm going to find the URL here from Josh Burkus, who is in Kubernetes and has been in the Postgres community for a while about what you need to do. Here's a video of one of his talks, which is kind of old.
We've run databases on top of our clusters, a whole slew of them, without really any issues. The big thing is just making sure your storage provider can actually do like passing through like actual block devices. You can do it like over like things like NFS, but there are complications and different flags you have to set, that sort of thing. But in general, though, we haven't had any problems outside of Mongo not being happy with various things, but that's Mongo.
Yeah, let's see. I'm still going to look for this.
Actually, one of the things there's even sort of more sort of like there's things like Vitesse, which are meant to be deployed on Kubernetes and will like sort of they're MySQL compatible and will automatically handle the like auto sharding and things like that on there without too much issue.
Yeah, I was going to say Vitesse for MySQL. I'm guessing they're using Postgres, but it definitely like it takes out the client burden of doing the sharding. And it kind of takes that on itself and helps load balance a lot better. So definitely look at that. But yeah, Josh Burkus is kind of I consider him one of the leaders of solving the problems of running databases on a distributed cluster like Kubernetes. So
here it is. Should I run Postgres on Kubernetes? It's a two-parter. Read the whole thing. And if you can, he's done various lightning talks about this topic. And actually, on the West Coast edition of this show, he used to come on and we would answer this question every week. But yeah, I think in the early days, it was pretty easy to just say, don't do it. But a lot of work has been going into this area. So hopefully that'll give you the information that you need. Thanks for asking the question. And probably our last question for the day, Ramesh, one interesting thing. I set up Kubernetes cluster with metrics enabled, but whenever I run kubectl top nodes, it always says metrics not available. The metrics pod is running though. I gave a lot of time for it, but it's still the same result. What could be wrong? The only thing is I'm not using a real SSL for the Kubernetes cluster as it was a test environment. I see lots of folks having similar issues, but no solution.
It feels like it's missing metric server. Like there is. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is for us actually in our deployment process, bootstrapping new clusters. We actually install metric server and kube state metrics. We actually run a New Relic agent as well that consumes kube state metrics, and then I believe Kubernetes natively is using metric server for those pod and node stats you're looking for, or metrics.
If it is deployed, my best guess would be it's an RBAC problem. And you should be able to up the logging level on the metric server to sort of see what it's squawking about.
Yep, absolutely. And then for metric server and kube state metrics, there are charts as well, Helm charts that we use that work great from the stable repo. So if you're looking for a quick, easy way to get that deployed, definitely consider that.
Okay. And with that, that's our final question for the day, and we're about to wrap it up. I'd like to thank our panelists. Great job, everyone. Welcome, BB, to your first office hours. I hope you join us in the future. Those of you listening, if you want to find a great way to get back to the community, you can just hop on here and try to answer as many questions as you can. Third Wednesday of every month. We hope you join us. And with that, it's time to give away the T-shirts. So I went ahead and ran the raffle here, and our two winners are Maxat and Thomas Pospiksek. Sorry if I butchered that. I will DM you after the show with a T-shirt code to cncf.io. You just go to store.cncf.io, any of you, and get a shirt for your favorite cloud native projects. I'll give you a little code there, as we appreciate you participating. We give away two T-shirts every month. So I'm not wearing one, but it's similar to this, except with the official Kubernetes logo and in a nice dark gray. And with that, audience, I hope you have a good time. Panelists, any last minute things? Congratulations, everybody, on Kubernetes on 1.16 coming out today. It's going to be a busy day. Last word? Anyone?
Just EKS supports 1.14 and EKS CTL also supports 1.14. Just the exciting news of my last couple weeks. So just moved all my clusters to it. So I'm super happy with that. And StockX is hiring, and you can work with me on Kubernetes and auto scaling and challenges of being a startup. So that's it. I'll stop talking now, I promise.
That's awesome. If you're looking for a pair of Air Jordans like you are, I definitely snagged mine through your Kubernetes cluster. Anything else? All right. Thanks, audience. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you join us again. Please help us by tweeting and letting someone know if we helped out. And with that, everyone have a great day, and let's keep those clusters up and running, everyone. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Oh, I'll publish the show notes with the URLs and stuff in the discuss thread, and I'll put that in the channel as well. Thanks, everyone.